Well, welcome all of you and all of you in person and all of you at home. Thank you for joining us today. And we are going to continue to do our programs this way, both virtually and in person, until we can forget the whole thing and just all be together. But it's also great too, because we do have several people joining us from out of state. So we'll still keep doing the virtual thing because it just expands our audience and gives people a chance to join us. This is also being recorded today, so it will be up on our YouTube channel by next week. So if you'd like to share it with someone or someone who couldn't be here, it'll be on our recorded. I'm going to take off my mask since I'm far enough from you and it'll help you be able to hear me better. But I'm Terry Emma. I'm the director here at the museum. Marky Striegel is sitting there being my assistant online. And Heidi, our educator, is up there. And you all met Vanessa at the front desk. So we're excited to finally open the 100th anniversary of The Little Traveler. We've been planning this exhibit for several years now, because it all of a sudden dawned on us that it was coming up. And we're very honored to partner with The Little Traveler for lots of events this year, so stay tuned for more to come. We may do some tours of the actual shop in May and share with you kind of the additions and walk through, and it will be your special, only if you sign up for that event, you get to come to it. So watch our website for more to come. And well, there's also a printed calendar out in our lobby for things that are coming up. So I have quite a bit to share with you, so I'm going to get going on the program and share my screen with those of you who are virtual. I just want to say too how honored we are. We have Norma Jager here with us today. Norma, you want to raise your hand? She's part of the presentation. She managed A Little Traveler from 1971 to 84, I want to say. And I worked for Norma in the toy department when I was about 20 years old. So it's an honor to have you here today. And anyone else work at the Traveler? Anyone else? It's just nice to kind of know. You did? Of course I did. Okay, great. And Betsy's here from The Little Traveler in the back. And so it's nice to have her here. And I'll move on with the story. So this year we celebrate the 100th anniversary of The Little Traveler. This program will share stories from the museum archives, such as the early history, how it got started, the growth and popularity, the Almanac newsletter, Kate's influence beyond The Little Traveler, and many traditions which still take place today, and also owners after Kate. And you're also going to hear some fun video stories from former employees, Norma included. The original home at 404 South 3rd Street in Geneva changed owners several times. Polly Patton Clark had the home built in 1867. She was one of Geneva's earliest settlers, along with her brothers George and Charles Patton, as in the Patton house behind us. She was also credited with being the largest fundraiser for the building of the Unitarian Universalist Church. After Polly, the next owner of the house was Orville Sheldon. He built the fine carriage house facing Fulton Street in 1891. So there you see it in the green box. Orville's wife died, and his niece Stella Buckingham came to live with him and continued to live in the home after Orville's death. Meanwhile, Kate Howard was born in Jeffersonville, Indiana in 1870, the daughter of Kate Lackey and Captain John Howard of the Howard Shipyards. Among her fondest memories growing up were the trips with her father down the long Ohio River. They would race through the night, which stirred Kate's adventurous spirit. She was educated abroad by governesses and grew up in the debonair cotillion days of Louisville, Kentucky. We just love that picture on the right. That was a recent scan that the family let us take. We love the bracelets on the wrists and the trim on the dress. It's just beautiful. In 1894, Kate married Edmund Raftery of London, England. We have her wedding coat on display in the exhibit. When you're done here, you can go and check it out. When he was appointed manager of Rathbone Sard and Company, a stove manufacturer, they moved to Aurora, Illinois. While there, Kate took a special interest in charitable work for underprivileged children. Together with Edna Smith, she co-founded the Aurora Juvenile Protective Association, which is still active today. Edmund and Kate were both very involved with the Aurora Country Club, and they keep in contact with those friends that they develop in Aurora, and they will later come into their future endeavors. So these Aurora connections that they make are very important to the story later on. When Edmund Raftery became president of Cribben, Sexton and Company, a stove manufacturer in Chicago, they moved to Geneva. And later they rent this carriage house at 404 Fulton Street from Stella Buckingham. Stella lives in the house and they rent the carriage house. In 1919, Edmund and Kate Raftery purchased the entire property and they move into the house on 3rd Street. One of Kate's close friends was Lucy Monroe Calhoun. She was from Wayne, Illinois, and Kate and her may have met either through their involvement with the Art Institute of Chicago or through women's groups. Lucy was the wife of a Chicago attorney and the America's ambassador to China. One of Lucy's ventures began in 1912 when she was given an allowance from the Art Institute of Chicago to purchase items for them. Later, she also purchased items for her friend Kate and sent them to Geneva. Kate displayed the imported items on top of her piano in the carriage house. So Lucy's a big deal in starting the Little Traveler. Kate sent out invitations to her friends to come and see what she had received from her friend Lucy in China. Interest in these items may have sparked the idea to start selling to the public. As written in this September 29th, 1922 Geneva Republican newspaper, Talk of the Town, the Raftery Cottage will hereafter be the home of the Geneva Gift Shop under the supervision of Mrs. Edmund Raftery. At the age of 52, without any business experience, Kate Raftery just began what would later become the Little Traveler. And here's just a month later, this article referenced Geneva's art shop as the Little Traveler Art Shop, owned and managed by Mrs. Edmund Raftery. And it says, at this little shop, which within itself is a place of beauty, charm, and altogether cozy, one may examine, but not always handle, quaint wooden dolls from England, hand-carved animals from Italy, real laces from China, and objects of interest and beauty seemingly without end. And imagine, this is 1922, and she's bringing these things all the way to Geneva. Kate knew how to get people into her shop. She sent invitations for an afternoon tea and sale, and she brought in guest speakers to lure people into her shop. She entertained the Geneva Women's Club regularly with exhibitions of needlepoint, real lace, old embroidery, and handiwork of foreign countries. Very smart businesswoman. This is the earliest logo we find of the Little Traveler on an envelope date stamped July 1924. Note the use of a ship, probably from the influence of the Howard shipyards and also the imported items that are coming overseas. But she's very fascinated with ships. They use them a lot in the early days in the almanacs. This is a current, this was just recently given to us by current owner Mike Simon. This is the first cash book of Kate Raftery, as written on the cover. It starts with a date of September 22nd, 1922, with cash on hand of $228.01. And if I take you to the last page of this book, it will be 1923, just a year later. She has cash on hand of $5,273. Not a bad deal in 1 year. We have several of her cash books on display in the gallery, and we do turn to the very first page. So keep that date in mind, September 22nd. I believe that Mike Simon is planning something at Little Traveler to honor that original date. The summer of 1925, just 3 years after starting the shop, Kate puts on an addition that connected the new building to the original house with a long passage. So it's going to connect the carriage house and the house together, and I'll show you a map in a moment. This creates a little courtyard with benches and old wrought iron lanterns. Fraser, Black, and Hubbard of Chicago were the architects. Later, Kate's only child, Howard, joins Fraser and opens an architectural firm in Geneva, and their office is where the olive mill is today. they designed that building. Howard's architectural skills will be a great asset to Kate later in our story. So here's the map I promised. This is a 1930 Sanborn Paris Fire Insurance map. Shows the large expansion now connecting the original home facing Third to the carriage house facing Fulton. And that creates that courtyard. That's a pretty big deal just 3 years after starting the little shop. After this addition, Kate hired a cook and a butler so a full luncheon could be served. Ladies were driven out from Chicago by their chauffeurs. Luncheon was served at 1 p.m. by reservation only, and guests were seated in the dining room among a setting of valuable antiques. I also read that addition also put in built-in shelves and cabinets so she could display the china and the pottery. The addition also provided a courtyard for outdoor seating during warmer months. Luncheons were served at wrought iron tables and chairs under large umbrellas in the courtyard. This area was later enclosed and is now the linen and lamp department, if you are familiar with Little Traveler. The luncheons became very popular, and the tradition still continues today with finger sandwiches, coffee, and some fashion shows. Here's a fun story about the Atrium Cafe by current owner Mike Simon.
Known for its little crustless finger sandwiches back then, and although the menu has changed and grown substantially since then, that's still the best-selling item in the store. And out of all the little finger sandwiches we sell, the favorite is cheese spread. And the cheese spread historically was made with an olive cheese product that was made by Durkee's. When I grew up and went there, that was always the one I saved for last. It was the best for last situation. And that's the way most of our customers still are. So we get more compliments on that than anything else. But back in the early 80s, Durkee's discontinued that cheese spread. So we bought all they had. In the meantime, Ingeborg and her staff did everything they could to duplicate it. And unfortunately, they couldn't get it right. And they experimented every day with different recipes, and customers hated everything they came up with. And my dad and Alvin and I all got comments from the customers saying, I hope you're not going to lose the original cheese sandwich because I'm not coming back to you. But try as they might, they couldn't get it. And we were down to our last few cases of cheese spread. And finally, we got the bright idea that my dad had a brother who was a chemist, and we gave him one of the jars of the Durkee's and said, can you come up with the ingredients of this? And he was able to. So we were able to duplicate it in the kitchen. But if not for that, I don't think the Traveler would be there today, because we would have lost all of our customers. So now we got people who tell us, oh my gosh, just for the cheese sandwiches, it tastes just as good as when I grew up. Little do they know.
I know I love the cheese for the last, and while we were getting the exhibit ready last week, I said, we got to order Little Traveler sandwiches. I went down and got them for us, because when you're in the middle of doing it, you got to have that cheese sandwich. According to this January 13, 1928 Geneva Republican newspaper, the Little Traveler shop was incorporated with a capital of $50,000. Names on the incorporation were Kate Raftery, Edmund Raftery, and Louise Forster. She was co-owner for several years, and she was the first buyer of the clothing department and a neighbor who lived on South 4th Street. In the early years, the Traveler was very exclusive and non-commercial. They did no newspaper advertising, and in fact, did not even have a sign in front of the shop. Their annual spring and fall openings were by invitation only, and new clothing was hidden until that day, and then revealed with a big splash. Here is a garment label that we have in our collection with the early ship logo. And we do have a dress in our gallery that was owned by Jamie Daniel, for those of you who knew Jamie. And it had the Little Traveler's label, so we have it on display in the gallery. The Little Traveler grew very quickly and the Rafteries were squeezed out of their living quarters at South 3rd Street. They moved to 208 South River Lane. Later in the story, you're going to learn what Kate did for River Lane. Kate and her family also traveled quite a bit to purchase items for the shop. This is a scan of Kate's passport from 1927. The family just gave us this last week. They sent it via email. And I loved it because it shows her height of 5'7". So she was quite a tall woman. Hair gray, eyes brown. And you'll note, we don't have very many pictures of her, but almost every picture we have, other than that childhood picture, she's always wearing a high neck collar. And you'll hear some of that description in a moment too. But this is stamped with all kinds of places, Germany, England. And this is 1927 and 1928, traveling extensively. And I love this picture. This is also one from the family. Here they are on the ship going over the Atlantic. And that is Edmund in the front, their son, Howard, and then Kate is next, and they're on the upper deck of the ship. We also have some of Kate's journals and diaries, and she would do daily accounts of her trips. Sometimes they're handwritten, but I think later on she would have someone, maybe her assistant, type them up, and they're beautiful. I mean, just the detail. There'll be a pasted photograph and then, you know, a very artistic paragraph entry. So this one is her journal, which we have downstairs in the archives, of her trip to Europe from April through June in 1932. And on the day of, this is what she writes on their day of their arrival to Europe. She wrote, "Customs men were waiting. They were very formal and polite, even at this unearthly hour. They gave us our landing cards immediately. Were we a bit hurt that they did not inquire? And how was that dear little traveler?" She's wondering, why aren't they asking me? They should know. She's very proud, and she should be. Kate had other connections around the world to assist her with purchasing interesting merchandise. Count George Bennigsen was from Russia. His family lineage traces back to Catherine the Great's Russian army. We have many letters in our archives between the Count and Little Traveler with lists of items to purchase. The Count said he would take items to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London to have them authenticated prior to shipping them to her. That's a pretty big deal. The Count served as an employee of Little Traveler for more than 30 years. He also made several visits to Geneva. Although we have learned a lot about him, he's still somewhat of a mystery. He did have relatives who lived in Aurora. We did find that he has an uncle, so maybe that's how Kate gets to meet the Count, through a connection again back in Aurora. And there are many references of the Count and the Countess, his wife, help out, in early editions of the Little Traveler newsletter, and they're referenced as their London branch. First time I read it, I'm like, they had a branch in London? But I think it's just, you know, tongue-in-cheek type of thing where he's out there in London looking for stuff for Kate. This is a Neal and Company Hadley cup and saucer circa 1800 that's in the Victoria and Albert Museum archives, donated by Mrs. Edmund Raftery in 1938. She also donated a few more items to them. But I think we also count, they've got Edmund spelled wrong, and we did reach out to them to let them know. But Edmund's name gets misspelled several times, a U or an O. And here's a picture from our archives of a rail car with a Little Traveler stamped on the side. Items and shipments were such value that Geneva Police Chief Reuben Anderson would meet up with the rail car for security. You can see him there with his motorcycle. He was known to ride through town on his motorcycle, and he would meet the shipments along with Walter Nelson. And it was said that back in the day, before the trees were so big, you could see the train cars coming in from her front porch. How exciting that must have been to know that it's, you know, here it comes, and go down and meet it, and let's see what they brought. The Little Traveler hosted many fashion shows starting as early as the 1930s. This 1934 Chicago Tribune article says throngs attend Geneva style show. Crowds of women from the North Shore and the city drove west to Geneva to see the charming tableau. So she's getting written up in the Chicago Tribune. I mean, she's just getting all kinds of attention paid to Geneva. She also hosts well-known artists, authors, and speakers. Here are a few articles from the Chicago Tribune in the 1930s. She's got Mrs. James Ward Thorne coming to talk about her miniatures. All of you know those from the Art Institute. She's got Mrs. Nikolai Remesoff pouring tea to open an exhibition of her husband's art. Nikolai was a Russian artist and film director, and he comes out later in the story too. But she's bringing in these very high-level artistic people to draw attention. She also has in her almanac, and this one's the 1938 summer, Mrs. James Ward Thorne, or Narcissa Thorne, writes her story of how she started her miniature collection. She wrote, "My advice to every boy and girl is to start collecting something, stamps, books, dolls, anything which particularly appeals to you, for it is the greatest fun in the world to have a hobby." And this really affected, you'll see in our hallway, we have our cabinet of curiosity, and it's dollhouse furniture that was owned by Jean Overton Wyatt. And Jean worked at Little Traveler for many years in the China department, managing that department. And she had a great love of miniatures, and I believe that dollhouse furniture kind of explains it all. It's really beautiful. But here's Little Traveler talking about all these miniatures. And then we also had a donation come in recently from Jean Overton Wyatt of all of her miniature collection and love of miniatures. And this was in her collection that she gave to us. It's a clipping from a newspaper, and it says that this one is entitled "The Victorian Parlor," and the caption reads, "The Victorian Parlor is furnished with the contents of a 100-year-old dollhouse, which Mrs. Thorne found in Geneva, Illinois." So we just thought, wow, we got to figure this out. So we found an article, thanks to the internet. We found a cutout image from this 1937 Life magazine about the miniature rooms of Mrs. James Ward Thorne. Unfortunately, it doesn't mention any more about the story about the dollhouse from Geneva. So we did some more investigative work, and we still have not been able to figure out the mystery of where that dollhouse in Geneva came from. We thought, how cool is that? But with Narcissa coming out so often to go to Little Traveler, it certainly is possible. Raftery's chauffeur from 1947 to 1952 was Sally Banks Compton. She recalled that right after World War II, Mrs. Raftery started to remodel because she said, "We're going to see a whole new customer base, working women." The minute the war was over and she could get the material, she put an addition on the Little Traveler with a dress shop wing. The addition was built in 1946 at a cost of $15,000. It housed Mary and Michael Children's Shop, and another wing was referred to as a chintz room for interior design. It was celebrated with models promenading throughout the new courts and corridors, showing off new fall and winter clothes, shown especially to college and schoolgirls. Later, a tea was served in the green garden. The Little Traveler was featured in the December 1945 Better Homes and Gardens with a Christmas Story. The opening paragraph of the article stated, "I went shopping for the Christmas spirit and I found it, unforgettably, in a rambling home-like gift studio in Geneva, Illinois, called the Little Traveler." That's in Better Homes and Gardens. Wow. And here is that edition that was put on after the 46 edition. The black arrow points out the new dress shop wing that connects the original carriage house again, now enclosing a large courtyard and creating another one. And here's an exterior photo of what it looked like after that addition. In April of 1947, this article gave praise from a New York writer. "The smartest shop in Chicago, 40 miles out of town. Here in 9 intimate and charming shops, Mrs. Edmund Raftery carries on what she refuses to call a business. It started as a plaything some 25 years ago when a friend in China sent her some gifts from." The article concludes by agreeing with Mrs. Raftery that the Little Traveler is not a business. It's Alice in Wonderland with price tags. This is employee Mildred Rackmeyer recalling working for Kate Raftery in the early 1950s during Kate's final years.
Started in 1955 at Stanford. Mrs. Raftery, Kate Raftery hired me. I was hired to be her part-time secretary and also work in the accessories department. And I worked there for 3 years. And a wonderful experience. She was a marvelous person. I used to go upstairs in her bedroom. She had a little bedroom upstairs, a little apartment. And I would go upstairs and sit at the edge of her bed and take dictation. In those days, we took shorthand. And then I'd go downstairs and type her letters up and get them in the mail. She was a really kind person. One night we were working overtime, a friend of mine and I were marking clothes down for them. They bought a cruise line, right after people would come by for clothes to go south. So we were marking all the cruise line. It was probably 6 o'clock at night. We were still working. And she came downstairs. And she said, "My goodness, you girls are still here." And I said, "Yes, we're working and marking." And she said, "I want you to take anything you want in the restaurant. Any clothing you want, or one piece of clothing." So I said, "No, that's like, oh no." She said, "I want you to do that." So I took a very nice plaid Vera Maxwell suit, I remember. And my friend took a David Crystal suit. Wasn't that nice of her?
I love that she still remembers exactly what she took. So that definitely meant a lot to her. She was a fun interview. The Little Traveler logo changes to a different kind of ship in the 1950s. Here's a letter from Kate to the Geneva History Museum just a year before she passed. "I want to congratulate you on the splendid work the Historical Society is doing, and I wish I could be present at the meetings, but as you know, that is beyond my strength." Well, I hope she'd like what we're doing today. The Little Traveler, with their new dress department, became the place for fashion. In this article from 1951, it states, "An authentic French setting set the style for the fashion show held last Saturday evening for 150 guests at the Little Traveler. The guests included Miss Connie Weber of the staff of Vogue magazine." And here's another recent find. I believe this is a photograph from that evening. We have several of them. I couldn't add them all. This program was getting to be it was going to take forever to do. But that's Kate seated there at the right, man's hand kind of in front of her face. And we have some other photographs. It just looked like it was such a great party. And Saturday night, and she's opening up really her home because she's living upstairs later on again. And but the pictures are just wonderful. It's like everyone's just having a great time. So let's talk about fashion. I have a few fashion photographs, and our hallway has them as well, from our archives that represent the high style available at Little Traveler. These photos were usually used in the almanac newsletters to attract women from all over the Chicago area. We don't always know who's modeling. We're kind of hoping some people will recognize people in the hallway and say, "Hey, that's my aunt." And maybe we can start putting some names with faces. Here's another one that we love. This is outside the Carriage House on the Fulton Street side. And today that's the toy department to your right and the gourmet then as you go in. And the doorway was part of the 1946 dress wing edition. And we did find out this is Phyllis Seaball, former Little Traveler employee. We do know who this is. This is my mom. This is Gloria Krieger Emma, and she worked for Kate upstairs in the bookkeeping room from 1948 to 1951. And I'm so glad I interviewed her before she passed. She's going to recall the story of this photo. She was only 19 years old at the time.
A company called Capezio, which had for many years made dancing shoes only, came out with a line for the general public. For women, all women could have Capezio shoes. They did look a lot like ballet slippers. And to introduce the Capezio shoe, Mrs. Rafty saw I had little feet, so she said, "Would you like to put the shoes on?" Oh, and then put the skirt on her. They dressed me up like for a barn dance. My skirt was made of burlap, and the top was a white cotton with a great big ruffle on it. And then they put a sash around it, and then had me put the little, was it yellow or pink, I forget, the little shoe right through the railings of that famous stairway leading upstairs to the office where I worked. And that picture was also published in their almanac, and then years later in the newspaper with a follow-up picture of me 64 years later.
You'll have to visit the gallery. I don't think I could put it in this one. My mom would kill me for putting the remake picture up. She didn't. She said I liked it better when I was 19. No, I did do it. I did put it in. I couldn't remember. So we did. We had her. Mike said this will be fun. Let's have her. We'll dress her up, and we just try to get her hair done and all of that. But she still liked the picture on the right better. She's like, "Now you can put that away." She's like, she'd be mad at me if I was showing that. But here's some more high fashion. Again, don't always know who they are, but so dramatic. And then here is longtime business owner Jamie Daniel, whose dress is on display now in the gallery from Travel. And she has a great fashion story to tell. She's pretty soft-spoken.
And I can remember coming into Geneva and going into the Little Traveler, and outside on the walks were chauffeurs walking Madam's little dog. This was in 1956, 7, 8, 9. There were no shopping centers at that time. This was before Oak Brook, which was 1962. And the women from the North Shore would have their chauffeur drive them out, and you'd always see 3 or 4 limousines parked on this side. And while the ladies were in shopping and having lunch, they would walk the Madam's dog. And I remember I went in once for a dress to wear to a big party, and she just asked me, she said, well, where is it? And when I told her, she said, oh, well, you can't wear blue because so-and-so has already bought a blue dress. And there would be only 3 or 4 dresses hanging on the racks in the dress room, 3 or 4 of each size. But she'd say, well, now, what, let me see, you wear such and such a size, much smaller than. And she would go upstairs and bring down 2 or 3 things. It was like going to one of the big salons that you saw in the movies. Then going, when you would buy a suit there, you would get an extra yard of material, and you would take it next door where the paper merchant is today. And Esther would put you down in front of a mirror and take that yard of material and drape it around and figure how she would make a hat to match your suit.
Isn't that great? I wish they still did that. And then, of course, the almanac. In the early years, the Little Traveler mailed personal invitations and seasonal announcements, but later Kate develops the almanac. And she wrote stories marketing the ambiance of Little Traveler experience. Early editions include letters from Count Bennigsen and other buyers. By the early 1950s, the mailing list included all but 2 countries and every state. We find these almanacs to be so charming. We have a few on display in the gallery, but there's also a TV where you go through and actually read some of the digitized ones. And several covers were made of wallpaper that she sold in the Little Traveler. So what a great way to market it. You know, here you're going to get a piece of that wallpaper sent home to you, and you can go around, make sure, see if it looks good in your room. But very charming. So Jean Overton Wyatt, again a former employee, recalled that Mrs. Raftery wanted someone to come out to design things for her. She called the Art Institute for assistance, and they sent student William Mullis. She met with William for coffee, and he stayed for lunch, and then all day. They got along so well. She commissioned Mullis to paint murals and decorative details in rooms at the Little Traveler. Remnants of Mullis's whimsical artwork can still be seen today. Mullis was also commissioned to create murals for the Palmer House in Chicago, Marshall Field, and the Mandarin Hotel in Hong Kong. These are some of the covers designed, or almanacs designed by William Mullis. We love his style, very whimsical. Here's a couple more. That one on the left is actually a foil wallpaper. The scan doesn't do it justice, but it's the shiny silver foil. And just the use of colors. They use pink and green at Christmas time and bright orange. And I mean, when these things came in the mail to these people, it was so special, they kept them. So we have a huge collection of them, and when people bring them into us, we're like, I can see why you kept this since 1950, because it's beautiful. The size of them is just so special. This photo was used in an almanac, and it features the widow's walk on the rooftop of Little Traveler, and she references it as the captain's walk, awaiting arrival of merchandise. So we believe this is William Mullis, based on when I bring it in really sharp on my computer. It looks like his profile, and what a fun picture. He's checking to see when the next arrival will come. Through our research, we discovered that William Mullis did not just stay in Geneva and work for Little Traveler, but he was commissioned around the world to create murals from Hong Kong, Morocco, New York, Chicago, and the list goes on and on. The Geneva History Museum nominated William to be included in the Fox Valley Art Hall of Fame, and he was inducted in 2018, and his work is honored with a bronze plaque at the Paramount Art Center in Aurora. And his family was there. We thought he deserved the recognition for his artwork. And now let's just talk a little bit about Kate's influence. Her creation of Little Traveler was the beginning of 3rd Street changing from residential to business. But Kate didn't stop there. Her inspiration and influence left a legacy of beautiful homes and several other businesses outside of 3rd Street. So remember I told you that she moved down to River Lane? Well, here is the Chicago Daily News. When she moves to River Lane in 1928, it was a dirt road with shanties. That's where they did all the dumping down by the river. My grandfather used to farm that whole area. It was a mess. So Kate was not going to live with surroundings like that when she moved down there. So this 1929 Chicago Daily News article says Geneva's riverfront is being beautified. Kate is pictured along with homes on River Lane. The top picture is her home, and the article states Mrs. Kate Raftery is given credit for beautification of the Fox Riverfront in Geneva, Illinois. We believe this is one of the very first almanacs ever done. She doesn't call it an almanac yet, but about in the 1920s, maybe 1928, it was put together to publicize Kate's redevelopment of River Lane, along with a real estate division of Little Traveler. On the inside are descriptions of homes available for sale along the river, and a clever note was added. Why not indulge yourself in one big adventurous economy? Change with the changing world. Come and live in Geneva. Perhaps Little Traveler could be your scene shifter. Note the use of a ship helm, again, from her shipyard days. So here now she's also got a real estate department. And I love, this is hilarious. So this is in the almanac in 1937. She says, why not find for your children a life like this? After all, aren't happy memories the only real things you can give your children keeps? We are not exactly in the real estate business. We prefer to say we'll help you look for a home, a place to really live. But then if you look at the bottom, it says telephone the Little Traveler Real Estate Department, Geneva 3200. So she's pretty funny. Kate had an interest in young people. Before she started Little Traveler, she opened Geneva's first preschool and kindergarten in her home, and it moves around different places in Geneva, and it eventually becomes Geneva's country day school. During World War II, Roosevelt had his whack and waves, and in Geneva, Kate Raftery organized RAM, Relieve a Man. Little Traveler was the home base for the RAM group. The RAM's home front helpers were high school girls of Geneva who wanted to do their part in the war effort. They enrolled with the U.S. Employment Service to do any kind of odd job that usually would be done by a man. The girls raked lawns, cleaned house, planted victory gardens. Publicity was national, and the photograph even reached servicemen as a reminder of the girls back home. In addition to her real knack of selling, Kate knew she had a way with people, an ability to bring out and develop hidden natural talents. She was very encouraging and supportive of other business ideas. Several Geneva businesses started out small inside the walls of Little Traveler and eventually went off on their own. This is a page from a 1936 edition of an almanac. The entrance to our new wallpaper and chintz room. The Little Traveler employee and interior designer Eva Anderson managed the chintz room. In the 1950s, she had her own storefront called the Chint Shop next to the Traveler, where they made draperies. Mary and Michael's children's clothing store started in 1930 in Little Traveler during a chaotic time of Great Depression. And Robin Dietz and her friend Helen North opened a one-room bookshop inside Little Traveler called Robin's Bookshop. But by 1938, they had outgrown the space. They moved their shop to their home on River Lane for a while, and later they joined Mary and Michael's on South 3rd Street in the C.B. Wells house at 220 South 3rd. And they became an icon in Geneva. And then, of course, the Forsyth sisters were friends of Kate's from her time in Aurora. Kate actively encouraged them to start a restaurant because she felt there was a need in Geneva for an attractive public dining room where really good dinners could be served. In 1933, the Forsyth sisters opened the Millrace Inn restaurant along the Fox River in the former Alexander Blacksmith shop. Kate promoted their new business and advertised it in the almanac several times. She didn't see them as a opponent, you know. She saw it as come to Geneva, shop, and go to dinner, and just promoting the town. As the story goes, on a buying trip to New York, Kate entered the showroom and announced she was from Geneva, Illinois. Well, you must know the Little Traveler, was the reply. I am the Little Traveler. Again, her chauffeur, Sally Bangs Compton, recalled, I would drive her into the gift show. She would walk in and they would practically roll out the red carpet for her. She was greeted very warmly. She would say to the salesman, I like this. Has anyone in Geneva bought this? If they answered yes, then she wouldn't buy it. If they said no, she'd buy all of them and ask them not to sell to anyone else in Geneva. And they never did. That's what made the Little Traveler so unique. They had things that no one else had. Here's my mom again, and she explains about Kate and what she was like.
Mrs. Raftery, as a merchandiser, selling lots of beautiful clothes to lots of people, always wore the same outfit, not the same outfit, but similar clothing every day. And it was always black and white. She usually had on a white blouse or a white lace jabot in the front. And then the rest of her was all black, a black long skirt, a black long redingote, which is an indoor coat, lightweight. Her hair was white also and pulled back softly into a bun. She wore glasses. She wore a bit of jewelry, a sparkle right on the jabot in the front. And she sort of sauntered around the shop from department to department, greeting everyone, making sure everything looked beautiful. A new kind of bow that people put around their neck instead of a neck scarf came out in different colors, different designs. Some were lacy, some were plain. And she said, here's what to do. I want each of you to pick one you like and wear it with the price tag hanging from it. And you will have people ask you about it and you will sell them. Let's see who sells the most today. So we did that one day and it worked.
Traditions. The Little Traveler is full of traditions, many of which are still around today. The Simons added a piano to the women's dress department as a reminder of the early days of Kate's displaying her items on the top of her piano for her guests to purchase. This is not the original piano, however, but this is a picture of the original piano with one of the Raftery's dogs napping underneath. We believe this is a photo of the real piano. Kate's granddaughter, who just passed away last year, has the piano still. And we're still trying to figure out, she wanted to, before she passed, give it to Mike Simon and have it on display where it should be. So we're still waiting for that story, how it's going to end. And longtime service by Little Traveler employees is a large part of what makes Little Traveler so special. Kate Raftery took great pride in her employees, and that attitude continues today. This is a 1934 almanac with just one of the many references to Aurelio Mancera, who was in charge of shipping, building maintenance, and many other areas of business. He's also listed as living at the same address, the Little Traveler, with his wife, Isabella. She was also a Little Traveler employee as early as 1928. And then we see these two young girls. Well, I guess she's the same girl, or Ernestina, different ages. That's Aurelio's daughter. She's included in the almanac several times. We wanted to learn more about Aurelio, so we did some digging and searching. I like to do investigative work. And I found Ernestina living in California, so I gave her a call. And I think I completely threw her off from her day when I said I was Terry from Geneva, Illinois, and she stopped and she said, I haven't thought about Geneva, Illinois since I was a little girl. But she said, I haven't thought about that place for a long time. And then she said, the Little Traveler played a great part in our lives. I felt very spoiled there. It was a wonderland, she said. She's told the story of how her father and two sisters immigrated from Mexico, and Kate Raftery took them in, gave them jobs, and allowed them to live in a room above the shop. It was also said that Kate paid for Aurelio's English lessons. So very accommodating. And here are some longtime staff members that we run across their names all the time as we're doing research. That's Ingeborg Hawkinson. She supervised the coffee shop for 40 years. This is Ebba Anderson, that interior designer from the Chintz Room. And there's Adeline Abram. She was the founding member of the Geneva Chamber of Commerce and the manager of Little Traveler for 30 years. And that's obviously Swedish Days are in their costume. Love this picture. This is Little Traveler became well known for their tent sales. I'm sure a lot of you go to those at festivals. This is the first time they bring things outside for Swedish Days in the 70s. So I got this through Norma's connection with Sandy Moreland. And she said she was told just to go outside and put some stuff out there and go sell stuff. So this is what they did. And Norma's there with the green skirt. And also at Christmas time, a longstanding tradition was the opening of their 18th century Neapolitan creche that they displayed every year, starting as early as 1930. And every Christmas you can see mention of it in the almanac. And here's a photograph from a display of the creche at Little Traveler. We always shudder at this picture because there's candles lit right outside of it, one of your most precious things, and there's candles. Anyway, it was continued to be displayed at the Traveler through the mid-70s. And here's kind of a close-up picture. A creche is a French word meaning crib, and it differs from other nativities in that both the figures in the setting are depicted as belonging to the era in which the creche was made, 18th century. And it was a tradition in Geneva. The Rafteries were very involved with the St. Mark's Episcopal Church and right around the corner from Little Traveler. So the creche was on display, and it became a custom for the church to gather around on Christmas Eve to begin their celebration of the Nativity with caroling and cookies and cocoa, and proceed to the church for a pageant. And here are some carolers outside the Little Traveler in the courtyard. At one point, the creche was put in storage and forgotten about, and it was found in a flooded basement in 1989 and given to the museum later on. And now we care for the creche and have it on display every Christmas. You'll have to come and see. This will be a special Christmas this year with Little Traveler being up with the creche. But with some of the letters that we do have, we did find just one mention Kate makes. And here, this is her handwriting. I got pretty used to it after a while, but the first few times I'm transcribing going, oh my gosh. But we were able to decipher here. She writes, that lovely trailing vine framed the creche. You know our creche is entirely an Italian affair and quite different. A press affair it is, with many figures turning in adornment to the lovely Sicilian Holy Family. The figures were a collection I found in Florence, and the Holy Family came from Sicily. We made the setting in an old Louis XV bed, very artificial and theatrical. But the letter is only partial letter. We don't know who she's writing to, and we only have like 2 pages of it. And here's how the creche looks today. Actually, the background's changed on this one too. It now has a mural of in the background. You'll have to come at Christmas time and check out the creche. Owners. So Kate Raftery died on April 2nd, 1953 in her apartment upstairs in Little Traveler. Sally Bangs Compton said, England lost Queen Mary, Geneva lost Kate Raftery. So this is Kate with her grandchildren, and that's John, Kate, and Peggy, and her daughter-in-law known as Monty. Her name was last name was Montgomery, so they called her Monty. Her grandson John remembered the day Kate passed. He said he was just about 7 years old, and he said we were allowed to visit the Traveler once a week and pick out a toy. One day when I arrived, I was not allowed to go in her room, and I was told she was gone. As the story goes, Kate passed in the morning while the Traveler was still open. They didn't want customers to witness anything, so Kate waited and spent the day in her room until closing. Many have found merchandise moved from the day before, and they feel her spirit still within those walls. And actually the staff over at Little Traveler keeps a spiral bound notebook, And everyone adds when they feel something, Kate's presence or maybe a possible ghost, and they've shared some of those with us. Pretty interesting. Julia Stephen Kraft lived in Wayne and was a talented candy maker. Over the next few years, she graduated from making confections in her farm kitchen to a large plant she established in Chicago. The company, Mrs. Stevens Candy Kitchens, grew with success. In the 1940s, she and her husband opened Honey Bear Farm in Wisconsin, which was a similar business to Little Traveler with retail shops and a restaurant. In 1953, the Crafts bought the Little Traveler, and Julia promised that the Little Traveler would carry on with all traditions intact. Everyone was very nervous. Well, they only own it for about 10 years. They had some family tragedies, and Julia wants out. So in 1963, Fred Harvey purchases the Little Traveler. Harvey was a man with vision. While traveling as a Western railway man in the 1800s, he was disgusted with the deplorable conditions of the food and accommodations he saw. He changed all of that with his eating houses and hotels. Fred Harvey is credited with creating the first restaurant chain in the United States. His famous waitresses came to be known as Harvey Girls. According to the press of 1880s, he was referred to as the man who made the desert bloom with beefsteak and pretty girls. Popularity grew even in 1946, and Judy Garland starred in the movie The Harvey Girls. I still have that on my list to watch. We also read that Harvey tried to take Little Traveler nationally, and he opened several other Little Travelers, and we're curious where they were and how many of them he opened. I did a little bit of research, and I did find the Arizona Archives hold the collection on Fred Harvey, and it had listed Little Traveler next to his name. And I thought, oh, I contacted them and they sent me this photo. So he does actually open one up in the Albuquerque, New Mexico airport in the 1960s. So he was trying to adapt to the new modes of travel from those railway days to airports. There's also belief that there may have been one in the Grand Canyon, but I have not been able to confirm that. But it flopped. Go figure. And here, 1971, the Simon family purchases Little Traveler, along with other family members and investors. And this is Mike Simon recalling the purchase when his family buys it.
In 1971, when my dad got the opportunity to buy the Little Traveler, he wasn't in the market for another business at that time. He was very happy with running the Merrill Lee stores that were doing very well at the time. But he got a call from Adeline Abrams, the manager of the Traveler, who told him that the Traveler was for sale. It was owned at the time by a company called Fred Harvey, and the people who were going to buy it were a consortium of industrialists in town who were going to get together and buy the shop and give each of their wives a department to run. And Adeline called my dad and said, "Saul, if you have any interest in buying the store, I know all these women, they're all customers, and they're all prima donnas. And if these people buy the store, I don't see it lasting more than a year. And I want a job and I want to keep on working. So if you can get the money together, I know what the negotiations are, and I'll make sure that you have all the information so you can bid a little bit higher than what they're bidding." And that's exactly what happened.
I love that story. Norma and Dick Jager raised their 8 children in Geneva. Here is Norma telling the story of how she became associate manager of the Little Traveler for the Simons in 1970.
So one day, Mary McConaughey, she was working in the Traveler at the time, and she comes to my door and she says to me, "I'm going to ask you a question." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "Would you be interested in working at the Traveler?" And I said, "Oh, well, I've got a big family. That's the farthest thing from my mind." She said, "It's only a couple days a week, and you could pick the days." And she says, you enjoy antiques so much, and you know so much about them." She said, "They really need help in the antique department, and I wish you'd consider it." So I said, oh, Mary, I'd have to talk to my children and my husband. It would be their decision, really not mine. Well, they said, oh, mother, you've got to do it. The kids were all for it. And I went to work 2 days a week. And I did that for about 4 weeks. And I worked in the antique department. And I got a call from Mr. Simon. And he asked if he and his wife could come and visit me at my house. And I thought, I must have done something wrong. This is all about. And they came in the house and they said, you know, we keep hearing how you love antiques. But he said, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to ask you to be associate manager. I've been watching you, and with the size family you have order, you have discipline. You're very kind. I've heard all about you. And he said, I'm just confident that you can do this. He said, in fact, I have no doubt. So I said, again, I have to talk to my children, and I have to discuss this with my husband. Because I said, this is big. So I did it. And we would have lunch every day. Mr. Simon, Mrs. Simon, and myself. Sometimes Mrs. Abram was there. We had lunch every day, and I would report what happened the afternoon before and the morning of. Needed no notes. It was fresh in my mind. And if I ever had a problem, he would say, quote me, you ever have any difficulty with anybody? Quote me. Mr. Simon said.
And then here's a really fun story that I just had to share with you today. I love this one, Norma.
Ladies would make reservations for the luncheon. You always had to have reservations because we were always sold out every day. And so this one day, a woman came in and she had 3 friends with her. And they had their lunch, and after lunch, they went into lingerie. Our lingerie department had gorgeous merchandise, beautiful peignoirs, Madeira embroidery slips and nightgowns from Portugal. Just lovely, and the house slippers that they had, or bedroom slippers they were called then, were Jacques Levine, probably the best slippers that you could own. They were beautiful. At the time, they were $25, and we thought, wow, that was really expensive. Well, now they're $125, and you have to order them online. Nobody handles them. So she wanted her friends to shop at the Traveler. They hadn't been there before, and it was a great time for them to see it and look through it. And she said, but I'm going to go to lingerie. And they said, we're going with you. So she went, and she's trying on different peignoirs. Gorgeous, gorgeous peignoirs and nightgowns. And she said to Alma, who was the buyer, she said, I'll take this set. Now her girlfriends are standing there very surprised. And they said, does your husband want you to wear things like this at home? And she said, oh yeah, he loves this. Well, this was on Saturday, and Monday morning, bright and early, she comes back to return it. She was only impressing her friends.
I told her she didn't have to say any names. I just wanted to hear the story. The Simon family was credited with restoring the Little Traveler to its former place as one of the outstanding antique centers of the Midwest. Another article wrote, "A return to the Little Traveler tradition of yesteryear under ownership of Kate Rath." So they had a great heyday and put on most of the additions. Over the years, the Simon family moved more than double the size of the shop. And in 1991, they added a Victorian conservatory on the southeast side. Simon and his partner Rosenthal came up with the conservatory design after visiting Europe. So I hope you enjoyed today's program with so many stories to tell. There's more I could even tell, but the exhibition, I think, speaks for itself. You need to go check that out. We're also going to be putting out a book later on. Hopefully by April, we'll have a coffee table book with even more information that you can add. But I invite you to come and visit the gallery. Little Travelers offering $5 coupons to go shop after you visit. And that coupon's good the remainder of the exhibition until December 24th, I believe. So thank you. And we invite you to join us in March for our next program. It will be about Kate Raftery herself, not necessarily about Little Traveler, but really who Kate was as a person in honor of National Women's History Month. Any questions? Any questions online?
I just had a comment. We moved here, my mother lived in Indiana in 1986, and she said, "Oh, my hairdresser is taking a bus trip up to the Little Travel." Indiana, well known down there, so the variety.
Yeah, we usually say that if people, when you say the word Geneva, Illinois, Little Traveler is going to be in the next couple sentences. No problem.